Sorry. Let's not go there. There are cameras and microphones.
Well, I mean, one day you might want to run for president.
Yeah, that will never happen.
And we all know Liam will expose anyone.
I know. The problem is that he's going to keep, some back catalogs of all of the trimmed out stuff. So.
Yeah, just like when I spilled my drink. He was like, we can use that.
I know. He's so excited by it. He wants to save that forever. Because if you die before him, he's going to make sure there's like a projector and a screen at your funeral. Yes.
Right. And also
I've already fucking drank my Sazerac. We haven't even started yet.
Yeah, you've also, Jeff, you've done a crash like diet-ish.
I have lost a fair amount of weight.
Yeah.
I got the Slim Fast. I'm doing them for lunch now.
Oh wow, Slim Fast. Yeah. You really are a brand whore, aren't you?
Oh, you know it. Welcome to Bar Business, the podcast that's also a drinking game.
It is a drinking game.
Yeah.
And like any good drinking game, there are rules.
Right.
So the first rule is, if we drink,
you drink.
You drink.
Right.
So, cheers. Your drink is empty!
I know, I've got one last sip. Oh.
All right. Well, there's two more quick rules that we'll go through.
The other is that if we mention COVID or the news, then...
that person has to drink.
Right.
And then the third one is, if someone's rambling on or telling a story they shouldn't be telling, it's a social.
I'm going to stop you there.
I'm going to stop you there. That should be a t-shirt.
That should be a t-shirt.
I'm going to stop you there.
You're like,
oh, remember that time back in the 80s when we got all that fucking cocaine? And I'm going to stop you there. Well, in the 80s, I was in single digits, so that story wasn't about me.
Right.
It's about someone.
Yeah.
Well, you refilled our drinks.
Yeah, which actually brings us to our drink of the week, as any good drinking game would have.
Drink of the week.
Drink of the
Tell
week.
me about this. What are we doing?
We are having a Sazerac. Sazerac is the official drink of New Orleans.
Wait a second. I want to hear the story.
Yeah.
But quickly, I just want to, we're doing a drink of the week.
Right.
Last week was daiquiri week.
Right.
Daiquiri is one of my favorite cocktails. And I think this is one of your faves.
Right.
And why is that?
Because it is boozy, it is potent, it is just a touch sweet, but it has this beautiful sort of herbal nature from the absinthe rinse they have on the glass.
It is potent.
And for those of you listening, if you didn't know, I grew up just outside New Orleans. I grew on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, a little town called Mandeville. And so, New Orleans was the...
Mandeville Parish, is that right?
St. Tammany is the name of the parish. Mandeville is the name of the town.
What is that whole parish situation? Like,
well,
what does that mean? Is that like a church?
Louisiana, being French initially, is actually based on the Napoleonic Code. They don't operate in the same legal framework as the rest of the states. And parish basically means county. There's some minor differences.
Is there like religion involved?
Well, so, France used to be a Catholic country, and I think that's probably where the initial wording comes from.
Sure.
And I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't give you the exact differences.
Wait, you're not a lawyer? No. Shut. I've been listening to you all these fucking years.
Well, that's why you keep getting in trouble.
Well, don't bring that shit up. Okay, so French roots and also Southern roots.
Right.
How did that contribute to this drink's creation?
Well, so there's actually a bit of a turmoil in terms of the people deciding what the history of this really is. The most commonly accepted origin is that there was a apothecary who
What's an apothecary?
Apothecary is like a unlicensed pharmacist.
Oh.
Yeah.
So like a bar, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And they were making these medicinal bitters, these tinctures that were said to have, medicinal qualities. And he made Peychaud's bitters. The dude's name was Antoine Peychaud, and he immigrated from Haiti to New Orleans in the 1790s. And
so bitters. So basically you're taking a high-proof alcohol, adding in stuff that's bitter, like maybe tree bark or something.
Right, roots, barks, leaves, things like that.
And then you're reducing it.
Yeah, and you also add some other things for other flavors in. Yeah. And so they were thought to be medicinal, but then they actually became really integral to cocktails in general. The first time the word cocktail appears in print is in 1806, and it is defined as spirits, meaning alcohol, sugar, bitters, and water, and the water comes from diluting with ice. So that is at a core what a cocktail is.
So spirit, which is liquor.
Yeah.
Sugar, which is sugar, and bitter, which
Right.
is what this Haitian man was making.
Right. And
So what was special about his bitter?
So his bitters is actually the second most popular bitters in the world, behind Angostura. It's got this brilliant pink color to it, and it...
Pink?
Yeah.
Paint.
Pink.
Pink.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful pink color if you ever looked at a bottle. If you go to any grocery store, they probably have it. Like I say, it's the second most popular bitters in the world.
Oh, I know what
Yeah.
it is. I'm just
Well,
letting,
I'm using you as a proxy
letting
for
our listeners know
Yes.
what it is.
Yes. Yeah, and it is absolutely delicious, and it goes into the Sazerac, which the lore is it was invented somewhere around 1840 in New Orleans, and it was made with cognac at the time and some bitters and some sugar, and was very popular at the bars
Cognac,
there.
bitters, sugar.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's almost like an old-fashioned
Absolutely.
that has been, like an improved whiskey cocktail.
Right. And it is commonly cited as the oldest cocktail for which a recorded recipe exists.
But wait, so I said improved whiskey, but they were using brandy.
Right. Well, so there was actually a blight on grapes that occurred in the 19th century that nearly wiped out all wine grapes in the world, because wine grapes are predominantly old world.
It was
grapes.
a global pandemic.
It was indeed, much like history repeats itself. I don't know if that's the appropriate axiom here.
Only no one cares about grapes.
Lots of people care about grapes.
All right, well,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to tell you to wrap it up.
All right. So you're going to stop me here? All right.
No, I'm not going to stop you,
No.
but tell
Okay.
give us
so
the
that,
history.
that is the sort of lore that's oft repeated. The preeminent cocktail historian of today's age is a guy named Dave Wondrich, super nice guy, and he has actually unearthed some writings indicating that maybe it actually wasn't really refined until the latter part of the 19th century, and that it may have been an embellished bit of lore that came from a guy who wrote New Orleans drinks and how to mix them in the 1930s.
So writers embellish things.
It's the first time that this has ever been implied.
This is crazy talk.
But nonetheless, it is the official drink of New Orleans, and it is what we are drinking today.
And what I was sort of asking about, and I think I know, but I'm not sure, is that it was initially a brandy-based cocktail, but the southern states were making whiskey,
Right.
And so it was maybe cheaper to get.
Well, so brandy is actually, its sense is just distilled wine. That's how brandy is made.
And whiskey is distilled beer.
Right, exactly. And so when there was this global pandemic for grapes, wine was no longer being produced for all. Wine, as we know it, nearly went extinct in the 19th century. And so during that period, when you couldn't get cognac, you had to make it with whiskey, and that's actually how we got the modern Sazerac.
Well, that's an interesting kind of story
Yeah.
of the Sazerac. I know we drink them ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, interesting. Well, what I'm curious about is our experiences of the last week. We're kind of in this COVID shutdown. What day is it? It's like June 19th today?
It's the 18th today.
It is the 18th.
Yeah, I'm losing track of the days as well. It's a Thursday.
Well, because there's nothing that really happens to like mark days, where it's like, next Friday is my friend's birthday or something like that. Like it's just sort of like I remember the things we're doing, but they're not associated with like days of the week anymore.
Right. Well, I think that we all have friends in different states and different jurisdictions and throughout the country and throughout the world, and everyone has sort of these different phases that they're doing of reopening, and it's not the same phases for each jurisdiction, and we're also not at the same place in those phases, so it becomes sort of hard to relate.
Well, and we're here in DC, which is, I think, together with New York, like the most stringent lockdown.
I hear that that's sort of true, but again, it's very hard because everything is changing constantly.
It's constantly changing. But so something I did, and this segment's called "What We Did Last Week," and it's gonna really talk about restaurants because we're in the bar business, and that's sort of what this podcast is about. So to witness everything that's going on, I took a little trip this week.
Yeah, where did you go?
And we went to Scottsdale, Arizona. I had a friend there who had some business he had to do, and he lives in LA, and he's like, yeah, I'm driving to Scottsdale. So I flew out there to meet him, and then we kind of road tripped back to LA. So
Did you go to any bars or restaurants in Scottsdale?
Yeah, man. Scottsdale is fully open.
Is it really?
I'm talking about fully open.
Not
Like
sort of 6 feet apart?
No. Straight boot knocking. Like at the bars and clubs. I'm talking about people got tables. There's 30 people at a table, like all drinking out of the same champagne bottle, like dancing, making out, eating ass. All the things. It was ass eating in the club.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so it's back like February.
Yeah. Yes. It should be a t-shirt too. Back like February. And yeah, I mean, so for someone, I mean, first of all, I will say that I talked to my doctor and I said, hey, listen, like we own businesses. I kind of need to be out. Maybe it's not essential businesses, but it is important to me. And there's things that happen and what should I do? And he said, listen, you're not at risk. Wear a mask when you can. Don't go over to grandma's house. But you know, the best thing you could probably do is just get it.
Right.
So that's sort of what I've been operating on. And so, yeah, so we went out and just sort of to be a witness and to experience firsthand what's going on. And yeah, Arizona is wide open.
So you went to Arizona.
What did you do?
So I actually did not go too crazy this weekend, but I did drive out to Virginia. For those of you listening and not knowing, we are based here in Washington, D.C., which is still very much locked down. We are in phase 1 as of the time of this recording. But I went out to Virginia because I had not had my hair cut since I think early February, and they had some places there that were
We
doing
saw that last week.
Yeah, if you are a fan of this show, if you are a longtime listener. So I went out to a barber out in Arlington, Virginia that I had been to previously, and they had, you know, all of the chairs were sectioned off. There were screens in between. You wore a mask the whole time.
During the haircut.
During the haircut.
How'd they get the ears and stuff? Because you got a little shape up.
So what they actually did was I wore
Because you looked like trash last week.
I looked rustic, is I think the adjective that I would use.
I would say garbage. Straight garbage.
So I walked in with my trademark bandana on, and they insisted that I take it off and instead put on a surgical style mask.
Oh, yeah.
And then during the cutting, they literally just held it against my face, took the loops off, and then, you know, did behind the ears and all that jazz.
We know that the people listening on audio only like can't see when we drink.
Right.
So we should probably cheers.
That's actually a good way to do it, yes.
So they know. But also if you're listening on audio, it's possible that you're driving, so you shouldn't be drinking.
Right.
At all while driving. That's a rule. That's one of the rules.
Yes.
Don't drink and drive.
Right. We assume no liability for operating heavy equipment under any sort of intoxicated effects.
Correct. So another thing that I did, so we were in Arizona, which was fully open. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a stickler for like enforcement of laws necessarily, but
really?
They were definitely firing heavy in Arizona. We went to Vegas and they were at 50%.
Okay.
And you could tell they were making an effort. So in Arizona, the bartenders weren't wearing masks. Nobody was. Really? I didn't see a mask the whole time I was there. But in Vegas, all the staff had masks on. The customers did not. Mm-hmm. And then there was like hand sanitizer stations like everywhere. And it's sort of like in the beginning of it was interesting. And this is, I think, a big piece of these regulations, which is they're trying to do their best. They were like tables all 6 feet apart, and they said, oh well, at the bar it's 50% occupancy. So if you have a 10-seat bar, you had 5 seats. But as the night went on and as people started drinking and carrying on, and this is Vegas, so I mean it goes till 5, 6 in the morning. But by 3, 4 in the morning, no one really cared. I mean, everyone was really kind of doing their thing. So, and another interesting piece is that the bar was at 50% occupancy, but the poker tables were full.
Really? There's no distancing at the tables?
You're straight elbow to elbow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious how they wash the chips, too,
That's the thing. They don't. It's just like, We talked about this last week. It's just giving people something to do, I think.
Well, all right. We may differ slightly on that, but neither of us are epidemiologists, so I think you should consult your doctor before you choose where to go on your next vacation.
I said it. I mean it. I'll say it again.
All right. Well, so that brings us to our next segment, I think.
Tell me.
So frequently asked questions.
So good.
Oh, I know.
Oh
So
gosh.
this is something that we're doing here, where we're talking about questions that we get as bar workers, bar owners, people in the industry,
Bartenders.
Yes.
Door guys.
Yeah. We've done it all. We've been dishwashers, owners, door guys, bartenders, everything.
I'm still a dishwasher.
Yeah, that's same. And so what we like to do is sort of highlight frequently asked questions that we get from the guests. And this is not a shaming thing. If you have asked one of these yourselves, that you'll find, because we have asked them ourselves as well. But we do find that they amuse us as we've had our time sort of marinate on them. And so we just figured that we'd...
And I think it's fun to, tell you guys, because it was funny, last week's episode, we talked about the frequently asked question was...
How long have we been open?
When did you open?
Oh, yeah.
So the guy I was road tripping with, he had listened to the podcast, and we're out to dinner, and he was fucking with me. And he talks to the server, and he was like, "So, how long have you guys been open?" And apparently, this restaurant had opened in 1991 in Vegas, so it stood the test of time for sure.
There you go.
So I guess it is interesting. Yeah. We talked about our next place. We're gonna call it Nuco established and
right.
Put it in the name.
Right. Exactly. So please don't think that we are in any way being mean-spirited or mocking you. So the frequently asked question this week is, what is your favorite drink to make?
No, that's your frequently. I have a different one.
Oh, okay. We're each doing one. I like this. Okay.
Yeah. You got yours and I got mine.
What? So I'm going to be completely honest with you, our podcast listeners, that I don't have a favorite drink to make. I don't really understand the nature of the question. It's, to me, the same as asking a mechanic which screw is their favorite to unscrew on.
What's your favorite ditch to dig?
Right, or an administrative assistant, what's your favorite number of copies to make? I don't know. It's literally the same. I can make any of these drinks in a 15-second period, however much it is. And as long as you enjoy it, that is my end goal. I don't get a increased marginal sense of happiness or dissatisfaction based on one drink over another. Whether you order a Sazerac, a daiquiri, an old-fashioned, I am neutral in terms of my net happiness until I find out that you love the drink that I gave you. And that is where my happiness actually starts.
Right. What's your favorite drink to drink?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the real question.
Right.
Because, if you're drinking it and you're happy, then that makes you happy.
The unfortunate answer to that, because we own a cocktail bar, is that I love beers and shots.
Me too.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, that's a pretty good frequently asked question. What's your favorite drink? I'll tell you mine. I've got a few, but we do this every week. So the one that I'm thinking about right now is, well, I'll tell my question in a second. What is that, Jeff?
This is more Sazerac.
No, it's a Sazerac, but what have you done?
Well, so one of the things that we do at our bar is that we will actually do large format cocktails where we will chill, dilute, mix, prepare the drink, and then just have it for you if you would like to have something. It's our sort of equivalent of bottle service, except it's a cocktail, fully prepared, ready to go.
So, yeah, and again, for the people that aren't as smart as you, which is everyone, the interesting part for me about that is that the cocktail has already been diluted.
Right.
So again, in kind of plain speak, you're talking about these cocktails having a spirit, a sugar, a bitter, and then water, which comes from dilution, which means the ice has melted.
Right.
So you are stirring the Sazerac, and the ice is melting, thereby diluting the potency of the spirit.
Right.
And then, so it's pre-diluted. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, so then it's bottled and kept chilled.
Right.
So when you're pouring this out of a bottle, all of the things, and then if it's a shaken drink, it's it doesn't last as long. We do those as well.
Right.
But the difference between shaking and stirring is an important kind of metric.
Oh, absolutely. And so, dilution is really how you take a drink from being super strong. We sort of think of most spirits as 80 proof. There's obviously things that are more or less, but your normal vodka, whiskey, whatever, things that most people are familiar with are going to be 80 proof. And a proof means two proof means 1% alcohol. So 80 proof means that the liquid is 40% alcohol by volume.
Yeah.
Right?
And the rest is water.
Right, exactly. And
so when you're distilling alcohol, you're extracting the alcohol from the mash.
Right.
And then it's like to 100% alcohol, or little
so
less.
It's usually you can get it up to about 91%.
Because
the maximum.
The bonds between the...
It's just that's where you find an equilibrium in the...
But before it's bottled and sold, it's kind of re-diluted.
Right.
So that it's either 80 proof and then you have overproof.
And honestly, there's some spirits, like whiskey, where you actually can't dilute them to that high of a percentage because you actually want some of those woody and other characteristics.
Right.
So you can't even make it that
because the higher the proof, the higher the burn.
Yes.
I mean,
that is absolutely
if
true.
you're taking a shot of 151, I mean, that's like fucking huffing gasoline.
Right.
So, by diluting it with water, you're making it easier to drink, and you're giving the drinker the ability to kind of assess the nuances. Because it's not just straight fire.
And as you dilute a cocktail, you then bring it down generally somewhere in the 20s, in terms of percent alcohol. So a good metric I like to use as just sort of a baseline is a cocktail by volume is roughly twice as potent as a glass of wine. But they're usually a little smaller in volume than a glass of wine. But for those of you drinking at home, trying to gauge your tolerance, you can sort of think of it that way. A cocktail is usually about twice.
I'm going to have to stop you.
Oh, that's a social, sir.
Right there, Jeff. Because this was actually my frequently asked question.
I'm sorry. All right. I like to
rambling on about shit. God damn.
Well, why don't you bring us back to your question?
The question that I got, I'll provide some color after the fact, but it was, is your next bar gonna be called Two Lounge? So the bar that we met at, that if you're listening to this show, my first bar was One Lounge. Opened it when I was 27, made every mistake in the book, sold it 5 years later. That's the story. It was called One Lounge. That's not a very good name.
I thought it was very nice.
It was fine, but it's not. We came up with it because it was 4 friends from 4 different backgrounds coming together as one. But then, of course, we had to buy a couple partners out, so it ended up just being me. But
does that make it Quarter Lounge?
Right, yeah. And it's just one guy lounge.
Yeah.
But so I recognized the name wasn't good. But I'm talking about every day. They'd be like, "Oh man, One Lounge. Are you gonna call the next one Two Lounge?" And I would just be like, "Ha ha ha, you fucking idiot!" Like, I've never heard that one before. So anyway, that's my frequently asked question of the week. But that brings us to the question of the week. Even though we love everyone and we're just poking fun, there's some things that you can do that are questions of the week. But then there's also some tricks of the trade.
Right, and I think these are some insider tricks where if you're going out to a bar and you want to operate under that old axiom, act like you've been there before.
Right.
We're going to give you some tips on how to do that.
And also for me, I love to travel. We also have investments in other markets, New York being one of them. And when you go places that you're not familiar with, the first thing I like to do is kind of find my local bar and get in with the staff.
Right.
And I'll tell you the way not to do that is to say, "Hey, I own a bar too."
Right.
There's some subtle nuances.
Right. In fact, if you work in a bar and you have done it for a long time, you will never announce to anyone at any other bar that you work in a bar. That's just something that's understood.
But it's nonverbal.
Right.
Because when you walk in and it's called industry. If you're in the industry, you know how to operate within a bar, whether you're working it or whether you're drinking it.
Right.
And you can signal the other industry people through certain things.
And that's what these tips are. We're going to give you a couple of the insights into the signals.
And the tips too, I mean, this is, you should use these. If you're out and about and you want to, be well thought of by the staff. And usually if you're well thought of by the staff and you're cool, you might get a drink or a shot on the house.
Yeah. Well, it should never be your goal, but it will happen.
It's not a goal, just it's almost like it's a sign of respect.
Right.
It's like, hey man, let's do a shot together.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's something that happens to us a lot. So what is your trick of the trade?
Well, so I thought this week we should probably just talk about the importance of starting a tab.
Starting a tab.
Right. So this is also, I will lay out a blanket here, not 100% universal. For some reason, the Bay Area of California does not abide by this. If you are listening to us in Oakland or San Francisco or Berkeley or, San Mateo, wherever it may be, you can safely ignore this because for whatever reason, y'all have your own culture out there. But generally speaking, if you're walking into a bar, you need to realize that there are a finite number of bartenders, and the bartenders can deal with a finite number of people at a time. And so there is actually, a blocked off units of time and energy that they can dispense to getting drinks out.
I'm going to have to stop you hitting the table.
All right, that's
for a quick
and
social.
I'm probably getting a little more wonkish than I need to be.
And then I want you to finish because I was actually interested. I just know that Liam is going to be in post.
That's our producer here. He is a lovely human being, but he does yell at us for hitting the tables. So, yes, if you are going to a bar, understand that you are using up the limited resources of the bartender's time, which is not to say that you shouldn't expect full service. But if you are doing things that are consistently and...
if you start a tab, it makes the bartender's life easier.
Right. It takes basically a minute to close out your tab every time you order drinks or close out your transaction.
Or more, and you have to keep track of the receipt.
And if you're doing 6 of them, then that's 6 minutes out of their shift based simply on you that could have been serving other drinks.
And here's what happens when you start a tab as well. Because the bartender likes that you've done that, so they're automatically happy with you.
Right.
So you're like, let me start a tab. And they're like, start a tab, good.
This is a good person.
And then they swipe the card, and the tab comes up on the screen, and it has your last name on it. And they're happy about that. And then when you go to the bar, you go, hey, this is what I say. I say, hey, I've got a tab, MCC McClelland. I give them the first 3 letters so they can find it quickly. And then you've made their life so easy that then when you order a round of 4 drinks, they might charge you for 2 drinks because they're so happy with you.
Right.
They're so happy that you have made their life easier.
So the thing is, you are dealing with people in a high volume, high stress, high speed situation. And if you are not a problem, but are instead acting as a considerate person, a solution, then really things are going to go your way a little bit.
So starting a tab is definitely a good one, for sure. And my trick of the trade this week, it's sort of similar to starting a tab, but it's really more focused on, like, if you're in a New York market. One thing about New York that happens, I think, more than most places, because it's such a, old and, revered sort of place, is that some bars are cash only. And so, for me, if I'm in a cash only bar and I want the bartender to know that I'm in the industry, I'll first order a beer and a shot, and usually that's a special. So you can get a beer and a shot for between $8 and $12,
right?
Usually. So I'll come with a 20, and I'll go to the bar with a 20 in my hand, holding the dollar. But I won't be like.
No,
signal.
You don't wave it
Never
in their
signal.
face. No.
Never. I just stand there, hold it out in front of you. They're used to looking at the bar because there's glassware and coasters and checks that they need to grab, so they're always scanning the bar. So you hold the 20 in your hand on the bar, and you go beer and a shot, and then you say keep the change.
Yeah.
And if it's $8, keep the change. If it's $12, keep the change.
Right.
Okay, you're tipping $8 or $10 or $12. Don't worry about it.
Right.
It's $20, and that right there is signaling to the bartender that maybe you're not even in the industry, but you get it.
Right.
You're not asking for change because
You're
the same
a bar
thing,
person.
The same thing as opening a tab is that they have to run it and print it and sign it and put it in a cup. The same thing is getting change. You have to open the register, you have to ring it in, you have to get change, you have to put it on the bar. You're taking up valuable time.
Right.
And I think that is, if you're saving the bartender time on a busy shift, especially if it's busy.
Right.
But if it's slow, even more, because then you put a 20 on the bar, and then the guy or the girl will talk to you, and then he might even say, "Hey, you work in the city?" Because you're doing it so right that they are signaled that it's
right.
a thing.
Absolutely. All right.
Drink.
So those are some good tricks of the trade. Cheers.
You drank.
All right. Well, so I think that
Which means you drink.
Right. For those of you following at home, drink. Unless you're driving.
For those of you following at home, drink.
But also, I think that we have another segment following these is the rule of the week. So we have here a little grab bag that we put in our little Boston shaker. Want to pull one out?
So we talk about rules a lot. We got the rules of the podcast.
Right.
But also, over the years of working together, we've sort of created some rules for ourselves.
Right.
All right. So I'm just going to grab one in here.
We're not rule people. There's a lot of rules in this podcast.
Well, we are. I am system oriented. Mm-hmm. So I don't necessarily like being told what to do. Yeah. But if I can come up with guidelines for my own,
right,
it helps, because then I can just be like, oh, I've made that mistake before.
Right.
Let me not make it again.
I agree, and that's very good for the listeners to understand. That's where we're coming from.
So, I didn't know that this was going to be the question when I mentioned having made these mistakes before. Rule number 2: don't hook up with your staff. Let me start on this one, because the thing about it. When you're working in the nightlife industry, when people are young and people are drinking and people are working till 3 and 4 in the morning, sex does happen.
Right.
And it could be between staff and customers. You might think the bartender's cute, or maybe you guys work together and you're in close quarters all the time, and that kind of thing happens. But when you're in a owner-manager role, don't hook up with your staff.
That is a solid rule that should be followed by anyone aspiring to be a manager or an owner in this industry.
And I think for me, a big piece of it is that we've done surveys, and we found that over 80% of people say that the best thing that they experience within a bar is the atmosphere.
Right.
There's drinks and food and all these things, but the atmosphere is really what brings people in over and over again.
Right.
And if the bartender or the server and the owner are having some secret relationship, I feel like it, or even public relationship, I feel like it takes away from the atmosphere of the place.
Right.
Because now, you might be think the bartender's cute, whether it's a guy or a girl, or, and you're like, oh, Joey's so cute. And, but then you find out Joey's fucking the server. So then the server is, and it's in the workplace. And if you're an owner, especially, whether you know it or not, you're in a position of power.
Right.
You're the one giving them shifts, or you're the one deciding if they, get fired for being late or whatever it is. So don't do it.
Right. And I think that the sexual tension between specifically bartenders, I suppose in some sense servers, but bartenders and guests is playful, and it can be something that drives business and can be fun, but it can be shattered by a lot of things. And so also, specifically as an owner or position of power, there's some ethical implications, and there's also a lot of social implications. So just don't do it.
Wait, Jeff, have you ever hooked up with
Never someone who's been a subordinate. I have, unfortunately, definitely hooked up with some coworkers, but I was never in a position of authority.
But even that sucks.
Oh yeah, no,
then you gotta, you see him, and even if the relationship goes great,
yeah,
then you have to work together. And if the relationship goes terrible, you have to work together. Like, it's just not, like, even, like, it's just not what you want.
Right.
It really isn't. All right, it's last call, man.
Last call? All right.
It's last call
Anything
for
else
alcohol.
you want
Let's
to cover?
Pour me.
Let's just go this.
We can do it. We can do it. We can do it.
I believe in us.
If we drink, you drink.
Yes.
Nice little Saz in the ice bucket.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm so happy that you're my best friend.
Well, I'm so happy you're mine.
Because you make drinks. And I drink drinks.
Yeah.
Cheers. All right, well, for last call, I'm going to quickly say, so, you know, we talked about this in earlier podcasts. If you don't know, we own some bars together. They're all closed right now because of this COVID drink pandemic. Mm-hmm. But tomorrow, by the time this podcast drops, hopefully we'll already be open. We have set up a deal to do a beach bar pop-up.
Yes.
It's going to be so tight.
It's going to be so much fun.
So it's Jeff and I and then another guy that owns a restaurant who's a chef. And essentially, we're just going to run it ourselves. We're going to bartend. We're going to make orange crushes and frozen daiquiris or frozen margaritas.
Yep.
And Chef's going to do a beach burger and boardwalk fries and some vegan dogs.
And we're just going to do them with high-quality ingredients, but very, very limited. You know, 6 drinks, 4 items on the menu. And it's just going to be a good time. And we have everything. We have it metered out. We've measured. We're going to be safe. We're going to have hand-washing stations.
Yeah,
but,
all the tables are 6 feet apart.
But if you've been sitting inside for 3 months and you want to start venturing outside, then we want to give you a safe, fun place to do it.
Yeah, and so the reason why we've done this is that this particular place has a 65-person patio, but the owners they have some other restaurants in Virginia, and they have other things to worry about, and they're not really able to open the DC location. We're sitting here so bored that we're fucking making a podcast, and so we're gonna take over the patio. We're going to do drinks, we're going to do food, we're going to have the mirror playlist.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it as long as this lockdown, you know, until stuff reopens, we're going to be at the beach bar.
Yeah. Grapefruit crushes and 90s hip-hop. Come on down.
Yeah, man.
You're in the area.
So, you know, for Jeff, this is Seth saying we never make reservations to drink.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.